Thank you very much. Yeah, this is a great space. Amazing. I wonder if I'm going to see if I can just speak from here. I'm quite kinetic. I move around a lot, so being stuck to this space. Well, I'll give it a go. Let's mix it up. I hope you've got a drink. Honestly, I'm better when you're drinking. That's what I've heard. My jokes are funnier. I look better. It works. I also think I'm better when I'm drinking. Hence the one. They've actually got a bottle here for me. They know me well. So yeah. So feel free, drink, go back and grab whatever you need at any point. So yeah, to start with, this is kind of, you Australians, you're not known for being bashful. You're up for a fight. You're like the Irish, that's why God loves the Australians and the Irish. We love a fight. Israel means to fight, And so I want to encourage that. I mean, I'm not here to kind of convince you of something and make you all think like me. Well, maybe I am. I want lots of little Pete Rollinses running around the world. I do. It makes me feel better if everybody thinks like I do. It's just the world would be a much better place if everybody was just like me, but that probably wouldn't be good. So, what's more important, of course, is that we have an engagement, that we wrestle with the stuff that I'm talking about, that we create a space where that's possible. You see, conflict isn't violent. Conflict, war. Let me start with this. War is not conflict. War is the inability to have conflict. From Northern Ireland you learn this, and a comedian from Ireland, Dylan Moran, talks about this, but war is where you can't stand conflict, and so you just want to kill the other person. You can't stand being in the confrontation, engaging with the political debate, all of that kind of stuff. You just want to kill the person. It's like being in a marriage and the other person's just yapping, and you just want to, get rid of them, right? That's war, right? War is the inability to sustain conflict. And so pacifism in a sense can be the most conflictual kind of worldview there is, because a true kind of pacifist space at times can be the place where you invite the conflict, where you say, I'm not going to just kill you or walk away, we're going to try and sustain this. Although there is kind of like the kind of hippie kind of fear of conflict, where you're in those kind of pacifist spaces where it's all repressed. So when someone says bless you, and you've never heard bless you sound more like, I want to slit your throat and watch you die of boils or something. So there can be a fear of conflict as well, which is then pushed down and comes out in subterranean kind of ways. But real conflict is where you can get together, you can fight it out, wrestle, mutually learn from each other, and something positive can come out of it. I think Irish pubs are the perfect example. When you go to an Irish bar, you start off and you're just having a drink with your mates, and then a couple of drinks in, you're like, I love you, I think you're amazing, I would give you my kids, please take my kids, have them, just have them, I want you to have my children. And then it's like, I hate you, and I want you to die, and I never want to see you again, and you're all the worst things I could ever imagine. And then at the end of the night, it's like, all right, I'll see you next week. Oh yeah, I'll see you next week. It'll be great. So that's the kind of space of conflict. Now, that doesn't mean I want to create a space of agreement and disagreement, because the interesting thing about agreement and disagreement is it's kind of the lack of critical thinking disguised as critical thinking. And in philosophy, you have to kind of, with philosophy students, kind of get them out of that habit. Because if I agree with you, it means that what you're saying fits in with my worldview, with my already existing position, and so I agree. And then if I disagree with you, it's because what you're saying doesn't fit in with my already existing worldview, and so I disagree. So agreement and disagreement is really a way of placing you in some way into the constellation of beliefs that I already have. What's much more interesting is letting another person surprise us, kind of disturb us, disturb our position. In fact, often, the first time you read a thinker, the best thing to do is to kind of put aside the agreement and disagreement and kind of ask yourself, what do I look like to them? And then you kind of see something disturbing, and you may end up in exactly the same place you were before, but you'll have gone through a kind of journey. So I want to create a space of conflict. I want to create a space of disturbance and surprise, and I want to have a chance, hopefully at the end, to have a little bit of kind of conversation, kind of like a Q&A, but not really a Q&A, because question and answer. A question always has an answer embedded in it. You know, one of the interesting things is there's a story about this couple who have this room, it's about this size, you know, and they want to wallpaper it, but you know, it's going to be expensive. They want this expensive wallpaper, so they're like, oh, you know, what are we going to do? So the next door neighbour, who has a similar house, they wallpapered their house like about a year ago. So they think, oh, we'll ask them, well, you know, how much did they buy? So they go next door and they go, you know, we're wallpapering the room, it's a similar size to this. You know, how many rolls of wallpaper did you buy? And they're like, oh yeah, we got 12 rolls. So they're fair enough. So they get 12 rolls and they're halfway through the fourth one and they're finished. That's really annoying. So they go back and say, we're halfway through the fourth one and we're finished. And of course the neighbour say, yeah, we had exactly the same problem. So they asked the wrong question. You know, so, and that's the trick, and Wittgenstein talks about this, is that you have to, in a sense, question the answers that are in your questions. So it's not so much a Q&A as a Q and a Q and of the A and a Q, which we'll do. And that'll be kind of interesting, and we'll also be able to hopefully have a few more drinks, although it looks like we polished off most of the wine, but, and bring this conversation further. So tonight, what I want to do is, in brief, I want to outline what I think radical theology looks like, what its key message is. And radical theology, I would say, is different from conservative and progressive theology, and I'm going to try and begin to draw that out. But there's a lot of material, and we're not going to get it all covered tonight. But I guess if I was putting it in a nutshell, I would start with this story. And it's a story about this guy who, you know, he's led a regular life, but he's done a few bad things in his time, and so he dies, and he goes to hell. And he's in the queue for hell, as we know, and he's coming up, and you know, it's a lot of bureaucracy down there, as you would imagine. And he gets to the table, and the woman says, well, you know, Seamus, you've done a few things wrong, we haven't been that bad, so we're going to let you choose how you spend eternity, right? So that's great. We're going to give you three choices. So she says, like, Cecil, come here. So Cecil's a big demon, right? You know, pulsy and whatever. So Cecil comes along and says, listen, bring Seamus down, let him choose what's going to happen. So Cecil brings Seamus to this room and opens the room, and in it it's just stinking. It's like a cesspool. It's putrid, right? And there are people standing around in this cesspool up to their hips. And I was like, oh, that's awful, right? So then Cecil brings him to the next room, opens the door, and the next room, it's even worse. They're up to their shoulders, you know, in this disgusting cesspool. It's just manure, everything, right? So he goes into the third room, and in the third room it's just up to their ankles. And what's more is everyone sitting around with fine china, drinking cups of tea, English tea, and with digestive biscuits. I was looking at this and going, well, you know, if I have to choose one of three, I'll choose the third one. So Cecil just shrugs his shoulders and right, go ahead. So he goes in, and sure enough, he gets a, you know, fine bone china, cup of tea, he's poured, gets a digestive biscuit, and he's just taking his first sip, and a bell goes off. And one of the demons says, right lads, tea break's over, back on your heads. Right? Like, I know, it's terrible. But this, I mean, of course, you just think, okay, this is a story about when things are too good to be true, they usually are. But at a deeper level, if you push it really far, it's saying something like this: the more heavenly you get, the more it looks good, the worse it really is. And I want to say that radical theology takes that to an extreme. Radical theology is like, there's an imam, an Islamic tale that talks about a holy man who carries fire and water everywhere he goes. The water is to extinguish hell, and the fire is to burn up heaven. What I want to say is, in the world today, in the church and out there, everybody wants to get rid of hell and keep heaven. And you hear progressives talk about this, you know, there's no hell, get rid of hell, you keep heaven. What I want to say is, you can't have one without the other. You can't have hell without heaven. You can't have heaven without hell. If you want to get rid of hell, burn up heaven. Right? So this is what radical theology is for me, and it's about radically embracing the earth. And I'm going to try and justify why I think that's an interesting position, and why I think it's important for the church to embrace. But first, I want to say that the desire for heaven is ubiquitous. This desire for a heavenly realm where there is no brokenness, no suffering, where we are whole and we are complete, where all the doors of our perception are opened, where all of that insidious stuff that we're dealing with can be made complete, can be washed away. We all kind of want that. Now actually, it's not the church that's promising that so much anymore. Well, they kind of are, but nobody believes them anymore, right? Where that is in the secular world. When Karl Marx talked about religion, which is key because he was following Feuerbach, right? And in his critique of Hegel's philosophy of right, he says, religion is the opiate of the people, right? There was a historian called Patrick O'Farrell who said, if religion's an opiate, the Irish are addicts, right? Because we have churches in every corner, we're really religious. But I live in LA, I want to say, no, America is addicted. And not only America, secular America is the most addicted to religion, right? But so Marx says, religion is the opiate of the people. It's the cry of an oppressed people, the soul of a soulless nation, the heart of a heartless world. That's what he says. And then he says, it's the imaginary flowers on the chains of our oppression. And he says, we must get rid of the imaginary flowers so that we see the chains. Not so that we despair, but so that we can break the chains and pick living flowers. That's it. And it's beautiful. It's quite beautiful. So what he's saying is, he doesn't mention God at all. Religion, he's not talking about God. He doesn't talk about theism or atheism or anything like that. He talks about religion as being a kind of way of numbing the pain of existence. But what his concern is he says, you numb the pain of existence, it's great. You kind of get through life, but then you don't change your circumstances. It's like being an alcoholic. Alcoholism is not a problem. Alcoholism is a solution to a problem. It's a bad solution, it's a solution to a problem. If you get someone through sheer force of will to stop drinking, they will then take up something else. Because if you haven't dealt with the reason for the drinking, they'll become obsessively into fitness or into Diet Coke or into whatever, smoking or whatever. Because you haven't dealt with the reason for the alcohol. The alcohol is a way of coping with some difficulty, some problem, some crisis, some flaw. And that's great, okay, but it's not, because ultimately then you keep going within it. In the film Collateral, with Tom Cruise is in it, which is a great movie, it came out, it's maybe 10 years old now, but it's about an assassin who goes around in a taxi killing people. And I talk very fast, by the way, so I'll probably maybe pass out at some point, I don't know. As I get older, I worry, honestly. So if I pass out, that's the end. Just in fact, that's how you'll know it's the end. I'll probably just stop talking, because I'm not very good at ends. Really, I'm not, so I just stop, and then there'll be an awkward kind of embarrassed kind of, is that it over? And then it's over. So you probably don't understand what I'm saying anyway, because the Irish accent. Yeah. You get 2 talks for the price of 1 as well, to be very fast talkers in Ireland. I try to slow down and I go, there's just no point. I just can't do it. You get double the amount. This is good value for money. But anyway, where was I? Collateral. You got this guy, assassin, he's going around in this taxi, killing people, and the taxi driver is interesting because he's this guy who he wants to set up this high-end kind of like limo service. That's his dream, right? And he's told his mum actually that he already has this limo service going. Now at one point the assassin is getting to know this guy, and he's kind of getting sick of the taxi driver always judging him for killing people. And so he's kind of like, you've got these pictures of these limos in your taxi. And you're talking about how you're going to give up this, driving this yellow cab, and you're going to have this job, and you've got this business plan. This all sounds great. This is an amazing dream. He says, so how much have you got saved? Okay, I don't want to talk about it. So how much have you got saved? What have you done? He says, you've done nothing. I bet you've done nothing. You've got this dream so that you can sit in this yellow cab day in, day out, and you will wake up in 40 years' time with a beer in your hand, and you won't have done anything. You're moralizing about me killing people. You're killing yourself, right? And there's this moment where you realize that the dream that this taxi driver has is not a dream that will help him transform his reality. It's the dream he uses in order to make his reality bearable, right? It's like the person in their work who says, this time next year I'm going to leave and travel the world. I bet you they're going to be the one who'll stay there to the end and pick up their paycheck. So the one who says nothing, they're the one who's more likely to leave, It's the ones who have this dream, I'm going to leave. That's exactly the thing that enables them to stay. There are dreams that help us bear reality, and there are dreams, which we may get to talk about later, there are dreams that help us transform our reality. And what Marx was talking about is how religion can be the thing that helps us bear an awful reality. It was like when your man, what was his name, who made this song, The Sweet By and By, who was suffered from depression, and he had this song, and the sweet by and by, and the sweet by and by, we will meet, whatever. And that he sang this, because it was a way of kind of, dealing with his depression. But Joe Hill, this kind of reformer, he then wrote the kind of rebuttal, which was the song which had Pie in the Sky When You Die, because he noticed that the Salvation Army were singing this song, in the sweet by and by, in the sweet by and by, basically everything will be okay. And these workers, these miners, who were like dying young, dying of all of this, like, you know, cancer and lung stuff, and they working to the bone, you know, who had no value bar economic value. They were coming home and they were hearing this song that one day somewhere things are going to be good. And in contrast, by the way, is Jason around? Could you get my book Insurrection for a second? Because I'm just going to quote it. In this song, he challenges the people. He says, no, this is helping you continue to live your life. This is helping you to continue to do this. No, you have to transform your reality here now. I'm just going to quote it very, very quickly because it's a great song. So Joe Hill, by the way, the guy's name is Webster. Yes, in the sweet by and by, we shall meet on that beautiful shore. In the sweet by and by, we shall meet on that beautiful shore. So Joe Hill writes, the preacher and the slave. Long-haired preachers come out every night, try to tell you what's wrong and what's right. But when asked about something to eat, they will answer in voices so sweet. You will eat by and by, in that glorious land above the sky, way up high. Work and pray, live on hay. You'll get pie in the sky when you die. That's a lie. And the Starvation Army, they play, and they sing, and they clap, and they pray, till they get all your coin on the drum. Then they tell you when you're on your bum. And then the chorus again, and it goes, holy rulers and jumpers come out, and they holler, they jump, and they shout. Give your money to Jesus, they say, he will cure all diseases today. In the chorus. If you fight hard for children and wife, try to get something good in this life, you're a sinner and bad man, they tell. When you die, you will sure go to hell. Working men of all countries unite, side by side for our freedom we'll fight. When the world and its wealth we have gained, to the grafters we'll sing this refrain. You will eat by and by, when you've learned how to cook and how to fry. Chop some wood, till do you good, then you'll eat in the sweet by and by. Now, I think they killed him. But Joe Hill was responding to the dream where religion was being used as a way of helping people cope with their reality rather than transform their reality. Now, Marx also said, I'm doing a lot of Marx, I don't usually do that, but he also said that the critique of religion is the beginning of all critique. And what he said is, he says the secular world is now taking this on. My main interest is actually how it's a secular world that's promising heaven. That's where you get the idea that you can be whole and you complete. So for example, in LA, in the drug culture, there's a new drug, ayahuasca, the god drug. You go to Peru and you chew it and you kind of vomit a lot, and then you have the kind of transcendent experience and you connect with God or the universe or oneness, and you have this sense of being, right? So you've got that. You've got the New Age movement that's got all sorts of practices you can do anytime. And lots of these practices, you can go to your terrible job 5 days a week, but on the Wednesday night you can go to your Zen class, whatever, and you can have this moment, and then in one sense it kind of refreshes you, so you can go back to the job that you hate or you morally have a problem with. You've got this kind of new agey kind of stuff. Or you've got what's really interesting, that my friend Kester Bruin is writing a book on this, a book called Getting High, which I think is a great title, about the human desire to get high, literally getting off the ground to go into the sky and into space. Because Kepler, he thought that Garden of Eden was on the moon. It was the only place high enough that it wouldn't get covered in water. So, it's this desire to get to the moon, and the pursuit of the new worlds, the pursuit of finding Eden, but also the pursuit of getting high, smoking weed, get whatever, to get high, to get out of your earthly place, to get into something powerful and spiritual and transcendent, right? So there's, interestingly, in transhumanism, you'll notice that the promises today of you can live forever, you can escape your decaying body, you can have omniscience, you can travel like angels faster than light. Where are these promises? These promises are being given by new technology, the gurus of new technology. You can digitally download your consciousness so that you can escape your body, so that you'll never have to die. Download your digital self into the cloud. You can then travel anywhere and everywhere. You can have all knowledge. You can interact immediately with all people. Those were the promises you used to hear in church. Those are the promises, honestly, that you're hearing kind of in the secular world. You see films like Transcendence, like Lucy. These are films about the transhumanist movement. Religion is alive and well, not really in the church, but it's alive and well in the secular world. The desire for heaven, the desire to transcend, the desire to get rid of this earthly body and to get high, in Kester's language, is rife. Now, why would I be against this? Why would I have a problem with this? Well, if it worked, I wouldn't. Be fine. Great. Do what you do. The problem is, what I want to argue and what I want to kind of hint at now is that this pursuit of heaven, these promises always result in a type of hell. They always have an underbelly. They never work. Anyone who promises that, like the world is a massive vending machine with all these products, and everyone's promising consumerism will make you whole and complete if you own this product, if you have this job, if you marry this person, if you look this way, if you take this drug, if you worship this God, if you do this, you do that, you will have it. That vending machine, everything in it is false, because there is an implicit lack to being human. And Paul Tillich, the theologian, he beautifully expressed it in The Courage to Be, where he says the lack appears in basically three ways, which can then be subdivided each into two. The first lack is death. The ultimate lack, we're no longer around. So that's a lack. It's bam, we're no longer around. And the weak form of it is, oh my goodness, I nearly died. You go to a doctor and you think you've got something very seriously wrong with you, and the doctor says you're okay. And then you go, okay, wow. And then you realise the doctor says to you, oh, but you're still going to die, right? That's the strong form. You realise that, I narrowly missed death, and then you realise, well, we all, in a sense, have a terminal illness. We're all going to die. I'd be a terrible doctor, because that good news and bad news. The good news is, no, you don't have this, but bad, you're still going to die, But that's the weak and the strong form. The second form is kind of like a form of meaninglessness. The weak form is, you know what, my job, what I'm doing, my relationship, it doesn't fulfill me. There must be something else I could do. And the strong form is when you get to the point of meaningless, everything is meaningless. There's nothing that would fulfill me. So it's a lack again, because it's a lack of getting something. There's something missing, something I'm missing. And the third manifestation, he says, is guilt. The guilt is in the sense of, I'm lacking, I'm not doing something I should be doing. Maybe you mistreated your mum or something like that, and you feel a bit bad about it. And then the strong form is, in a sense, going, I can never be the ideal that I think I want to be. I can never match up to. A dog is a dog is a dog, right? A stone is a stone is a stone. But human beings, we have this sense of, what does it mean to be human? Can we ever match up to what that means to be human? And that's why, even if we can live forever, even if the technology people can digitally download us into the cloud, and for all intents and purposes death becomes a very, very distant thing, death is still a reality. That's the thing about Christianity, interestingly, is Christianity is, for me, not about death as in the end of life. I think most of the time you'll see in the text, it's about a form of death that exists within life. An existential death. So whenever Christ says, let the dead bury the dead, he's not talking about the literal dead burying the dead. He's talking about the living who live in a form of death. Or when he says, I've come to bring life, and life in all its fullness, he's not talking to graveyards. He's talking to people who are living, but live a mode of death. And that's what Heidegger means when he talks about death is not something that happens at the end of life. Death is infused in life. We're constantly experiencing lack in different ways and loss in different ways in life. So if I had this gift and I could touch you in the forehead and you would live forever, but I couldn't help you experience the depth of your life, I wouldn't be a god, I'd be a devil. That's the wisdom of Silencius. When the king finally captures the demon and says, tell me the secret of happiness. And the demon laughs, a shrill laugh, and says, why do you ask? The truth of what brings happiness is beyond you. To never have been born. But the next the next best thing is to die quick. Right? That's the way. If you cannot experience the depth of your life, then life is hell. Heaven would be a place where billions of people would be screaming unendingly for the end. If eternal life is just longevity, count me out, right? And it has to be something about a transformation in the very intensity of existence, in the depth of existence itself. So the idea that I want to kind of express here is the second, and that's why I'm really against the second. I'm out there preaching the second word. You think you're not religious? There's a story very quickly about back in Ireland. There's this show where they did a competition to build a pen for sheep, a sheep pen. Who could build the best sheep pen? Now this sounds like really ridiculous, but we did have ridiculous programs when we grew up. We had a program called One Man and His Dog. Seriously, prime time TV when I was a kid, and there was a show of one man and a dog, and the dog would round up sheep. That's all it was, and he would be whistling, and that's what we watched at prime time. This is terrible. It's like really true. But so there's 3 people enter this competition, and they have to build a pen, and they've got a certain amount of material, a certain amount of time. And 3 people enter: an architect, an engineer, and this farmer, this guy called Seamus, right? And so the engineer, he builds this pen, can fit 100 sheep. Very good. And then there's this architect, and she creates this kind of circular thing, and that fits 150 sheep, and that's really impressive. Seamus, he just sits out and suns himself, gets an Irish tan, which is a bit red, So he sits and smokes his cigar, and then he sees the judges coming. He's like, oh no, right? So he quickly gets up and makes a makeshift pen that's like tiny. He can just fit in it, and he's inside painting it as the judges come up. And the judges laugh and say, you couldn't fit 1 sheep in that. What are you talking about? And of course Seamus says, no, he says, you misunderstand. He says, I'm not in the pen. He says, you're in the pen. I'm standing outside. Right? In other words, that's what the answer is for me. Is the people in the secular will say, I'm not religious. I would say, no, you're standing in religion. The one place to escape religion is the church. Now, not necessarily the church in its actually existing form, but the radical church. You want to escape religion, join the church. You want to start doubting all that stuff and let go of the idea of perfection and holiness and completeness and embrace the messiness of existence. Oh, have you seen the church? It's a nightmare. Join us, right? We don't have a clue what we're doing, right? So there's 2 ways that this sustains. When someone promises you heaven, the first thing that results is either the creation of a scapegoat, right? A scapegoat is someone who you blame for things not going right. So there's a problem in the system, and so the scapegoat is the one who if we could get rid of them, everything would be fine, right? The scapegoat, but the problem is the scapegoat actually isn't the problem. Again, the scapegoat is the solution to a problem. The scapegoat is the way of masking the reality that there's a flaw in the system itself. So you go, oh, things would be great if only it wasn't for them. If only it wasn't for the homeless, things would be better. If only it wasn't for the immigrants, things would be fantastic here, whatever it is. The scapegoat is, if only we got rid of them, everything would be great. But the scapegoat is the solution to a problem. They are what prevents you from seeing a crisis. I have a friend who talks about how within our contemporary society a crisis is coming. Within consumerist capitalism, we think it's going to be like the road, it's going to be apocalyptic. I keep telling him, no, the crisis isn't coming, it's already here. What's interesting about our society is how we can manage the crisis, how we can put the crisis on other people and other places and other countries. The crisis isn't arriving, something even worse might be coming, but the crisis is already here, and the scapegoat is the very thing that you use in order to prevent yourself from seeing the crisis. Just think about the Batman. So the Batman is this guy, right, a kid. Bruce Wayne, when he's a kid, he sees his parents killed. A horrible thing. He sees them murdered, right? He's a billionaire. So what does he do? So he uses his money. He's working at Wayne Industries. He takes so much money and he creates basically the most high-tech military spec equipment in the world. And on a Friday night and on a Saturday night, he goes out and he beats up criminals, right? And then he goes into work on a Monday. Right? Now, of course, there's an issue here. You go like, what's going on? Because that's completely impotent as a strategy. In Gotham City, going out on a Friday night and beating up some criminals, what's good is that? Why are those criminals there? Well, they're there because there are no jobs in Gotham City. They're there because they don't have education, they don't have health care, because they have, those trying to feed their family, right? And they're like, of course, there's some psychopaths in Gotham City, like the Joker, and the Joker doesn't care about money. But the people who work for the Joker care about money. They're trying to get by, right? And so what's Batman doing? Beating them up. You go, so why is he doing that? When he could spend that money on healthcare programs, when he could spend that money on job training programs, when he could spend that money on actually kind of like after school kids programs. I mean, that would make a much more of an impact. And so you have to wonder, what's going on? The Batman obviously is dealing with an issue, or is not dealing with an issue, which is the death of his parents, right? So he goes out on Friday and Saturday night, he feels better for beating up criminals, but he then perpetuates a system where nothing changes in Gotham City. If he had the courage, Batman isn't brave. You know, we watch Batman and think he's this brave guy. He's a coward. He won't look at his own problems. He won't look inside, and so he projects outside, and he fights. So he thinks, if I get rid of the criminals, everything will be better. But no, like the typical person scapegoating, he needs the criminals in order to survive. He needs the criminals in order to not be able to, so as he doesn't sit in on a Friday night and have to look at the pain that's in himself. That's like the French Foreign Legion, you know, these people who, why do they go? To forget. So they go into one of the harshest regimes because they can't deal with their loss and their brokenness, and so they go into that. So only if Batman is able to actually deal with the death of his parents, he no longer needs to go out on Friday night and beat up the criminals, and he can actually do some good in Gotham City with the money he has, right? So that's the kind of structure of the scapegoat. The scapegoat, and for Batman it's the criminals, allow Batman not to see the crisis that he's in. So you kind of go, oh, the homeless are the problem. If we can get rid of the homeless, and even in the best possible way, we can kind of like, let's feed the homeless, give them this, give them that, But what if the homeless are not the problem? They're the solution to your problem. They're society's solution. They are what prevents society from looking at a crisis within itself. There's a crisis within the society, and the homeless are the result of the crisis. And actually, instead of giving to the homeless are the site of salvation. They are the ones that make explicit, that bring up the internal crisis within the society. We do not save the homeless, we do not save the immigrants, they save us. Or they're at least, like that for me is the very key of conversion. You see this in Paul, a paradigmatic conversion is Paul. What is Paul doing? Perfect scapegoating. The religious system of the day, it's this group of Christians, they're the problem. If we could get rid of them, everything would be better, right? So scapegoating. There's not a crisis within the religious structure, there's actually a cancer that needs to be cut out. Right? That's what a symptom does. A symptom kind of says, there's something if I could cut out, you know, everything would be good. It's like, very quickly, you know, there's a guy on a desert island, and he's been there for like 10 years on his own, nobody else on the island at all, right? And so this plane sees him and lands and takes him off the island. Before they do, they say, how did you live here for 10 years and there's nobody else on the island? And he said, well, it was okay, there's lots of food, there's lots of like wildlife. And they said, show us where you lived. So he brings them to this kind of clearing, and he shows them his house. He says, I built this whenever I first arrived. And they're like, well, it's really impressive, it's really good structure. And then they notice a building beside it, and they said, what's that building? And this guy said, he says, I'm a very religious man, that's my church. You know, I go there every week and I worship. You know, on Tuesday night I go there, read my Bible. And then just about to leave, and they notice that there's another building beside that. And I said, what's that? What's that building? And he said, I don't want to talk about it. I said, well, no, come on, what is it? He said, no, I don't want to talk about it. He said, what? He says, that's a church I used to go to. Terrible place. Right? You can't deal with your own internal conflict, so you have to project it out. Even if there's nothing else, you project it out to the past, or that old church, or that old person, the people next door. It's the inability to see that that is not their problem. That's your problem that you're unable to deal with, right? So, and if you could only cut it out, it'd be fine. So Paul is sitting going, get rid of the Christians and everything would be great. And then he has the psychoanalytic insight. He is blinded. A revelation of darkness, my friend Barry Taylor would say, a revelation of darkness. And he hears this voice, why are you persecuting me? In other words, he gets this realization that the very people he's persecuting as the problem are his salvation. The very kind of rock that he thinks he has to get rid of is the corner. The very thing that he has to get rid of is what can feed into him and actually bring true transformation to him. So I would say, you know, in the kind of theopoetics, God is always in the persecuted. You know, you don't go out to help the poor, you go out to be saved. And But the point of this is not that. The point is that the first way that we sustain a system of transcendence, that everything's great, is we blame someone for it not working. And we have a scapegoat. And the scapegoat carries our hell. Right? But that only works to a certain extent, because the other thing that happens is symptoms. And this is what interests me more at the moment in the work that I'm doing, is the other thing that in any ideological system that kind of gives you the answer and tells you how to be whole and complete and all of that, it doesn't just tell you what you can do and what you can't do, what's acceptable and what's unacceptable. Everybody thinks ideology works in that way. Ideology or religion, it tells you what you can do and what you can't do. No. The interesting thing about ideology is it tells you what you can do, it tells you what's acceptable, it tells you what's unacceptable, and it tells you the acceptable way of doing unacceptable things. And that's the key. Right? So, for example, take three examples. Take a political example very quickly. Is society, there's certain things you can do and there's certain things you can't do. But then there's the third, which is there's certain things you shouldn't do, but it's acceptable. So Dave recently, my friend, he was taking part in a protest against, it was kids who are being imprisoned, immigration, they're coming in, yeah. Was it? Asylum seekers, that's the word, thank you. So he's taking part in this protest. And there's a certain point in the protest where what you're doing is unacceptable. So who was the politician's office you were at?
The treasurer,
Joe Hockey. I don't know these people, but you're there. And so there's a certain point when the protest becomes unacceptable, and so the police show up. And then the police will say, you can leave or you can get arrested, right? And then there's a little bit of back and forth, and at that point you go, now at that point, you're kind of like a joker. A joker, if you're in medieval times, was someone who was able to critique the structure, critique the king, but they were paid by the king and they were endorsed by the king. And so strangely, they were able to transgress, but in an acceptable way. Right? And if they went too far, they'd get killed. Right? So they had to walk a fine line of transgressing in an acceptable way. You're able to protest in society as long as you turn up at a certain time, leave at a certain time, pick up your rubbish and fill out some forms. Right? That is a socially acceptable transgression. That is something that is not allowed, but it's allowed. It's allowable, not allowed. But then the people stayed, or some people stayed. Then it goes from the joker, who is the transgressor, who transgresses in an acceptable way, to a trickster. A trickster is someone who transgresses in a way that transforms the structure itself. And these guys got arrested. And they got arrested, brought in, and of course now they're not charging, because they realise that they charge them, things come up to the surface, then it comes a public debate. That's what, in politics, that's the bringing up of the unacceptable transgression. All ideology functions by saying, because it doesn't work, because there's a crisis already in it, it always lets you do certain unacceptable things, as long as you don't talk about it. And the radical political move is bringing what's not said to the surface. WikiLeaks is a perfect example. Slavoj Žižek, when he talked about Julian Assange, he said, what was radical about WikiLeaks wasn't what we didn't know. That was boring, that was tabloid stuff. What one politician thought of another was boring, right? That was just, they didn't like each other. What was really truly radical, what got death threats, is the stuff we all knew but didn't want to know that we knew. Black hole prisons, murder of innocents, torture of people, we all knew that was happening. We just didn't want to know that we knew. That's the radical move of bringing up the acceptable transgressions to the surface so they can't be faced. There's actually, I don't know if you have them here, but there's a great comic duo who I love called Mitchell and Webb in the UK. And they had a skit which kind of plays on this. And it's basically, there's two henchmen, and they've got this figure who's like an evil genius, and he looks like a James Bond bad guy, bald head, and he's always talking in a very evil kind of way. And anyway, he's sitting in his evil office, having an evil cup of coffee, and there's two henchmen come in, and this is the conversation that happens. Henchman number one. I'm afraid, sir, we still have a problem with Detective Harrison, the evil genius. Yes, Mr. Harrison has an irritating talent for disrupting my arrangements. Well, would you like me to have him removed? Yes. Perhaps it would be better if Detective Harrison were taken out of the picture. At this point, the second henchman speaks. Sorry guys, you're doing it again. What, Alan? Have him removed, taken out of the picture. I thought we agreed at the meeting that these terms are needlessly ambiguous. We all agreed from now on, when we want someone murdered, i.e. deliberately killed to death, then that's what we're going to say. Henchman number one. Look, everyone knows what we mean. Well, on this occasion, perhaps. I mean, that wasn't ordered to murder Detective Harrison, wasn't it? Evil genius. He has become a nuisance. Right. But a nuisance we should murder. I mean, my nephew's a nuisance, but you know what I'm saying? Yes, all right. Well, can you say it then, please? Okay. Please deal with the Harrison situation. You see, that's no good. Oh, that's perfectly clear. What are you talking about, Keith? This is going to be, let's hope Professor Ritson meets with a little accident all over again. We spent 9 months hoping that Professor Ritson would meet with an accident before Leslie here made it clear that it was an accident we were supposed to make happen. Right? And then the evil genius at the end says to the henchman, perhaps you'll join me later for some light entertainment. And the henchman says, you mean anal sex? Yes. You know, so it's but the interesting thing about the skit is it can't be said. Everybody knows it's happening, but it can't be said. That's the thing that we're all connected by. A transgression that we all know, but we all know that we can't say. So in a marriage, it works out. The marriage is going perfectly, everything's great, but the unacceptable or the acceptable transgression, when you can have the odd affair but just don't say anything, right? So, and in fact, it's annoying if someone actually says it. It's nice, don't say it, and then everything can run. The affair is the very thing that allows the structure to continue. The dysfunction isn't coming. The dysfunction already exists within the marriage, but the unacceptable transgressions allow it to continue on. So you can have a dysfunctional marriage for 20 years, that as long as there's an acceptable transgression taking place, it continues to go. The marriage will only undergo a change, one way or the other, by the way, if the unacceptable transgression is brought to the surface. When that happens, either the couple will work it out, whatever, or they'll split and go their separate ways. But one thing's for certain, things can't stay the same. And I would say either way they choose is better than the thing that they've got. The unacceptable transgression is what allows the system, the ideology, to continue to function. And one last example, which is the religious example. In conservative churches, I've got loads of examples of this, but I won't go into them. But you know, in a conservative church, what's acceptable is belief. You believe X, Y, and Z. What's the transgression is to doubt those things, to question them, right? But the acceptable transgression is you can do that as long as it's behind closed doors. So I talked to a leader who, you know, she was saying to me, she was an elder in a church and she was on the leadership team and the worship team. And she said, you know, I'm 50 years old, I've just come out of cancer treatment, I've had a lot of time to think about what I believe, and I don't know if I believe in, like, you know, a resurrection literally or anything like that anymore. And she was very upset, and she was like, I don't know where I'm at with it all. And I'm like, why are you upset? And she said, well, if I told my eldership board, you know, they kicked me off the eldership. But of course then I asked, well, do you think that they don't have those questions? And she was like, well, I guess they probably do. I mean, they're thoughtful and they've been in this for a while. I guess they are. So I'm going, okay, so the unacceptable transgression is not having the doubts, it's sharing them, right? And that's why we all know the minister doesn't believe half of what they say. And I'm not talking about United people, right? We all know none of them believe it, right? But I'm talking about the evangelicals. We all know that most of them don't believe it either. I know a load of them. And like the people who are singing the song, they don't believe half of it. And you know, and a lot of them even just pay to come in. They don't believe any of it. We all know that, but we do want to know that we know it. So the crisis isn't that the minister doesn't believe half of it and has a terrible marriage. The crisis is if they share it. Because it's like, why? I know we know it. We know the emperor's got no clothes. Don't tell us. You know, let's keep everything going on as normal. And so the fundamentally problematic ideological structure continues to function because it's not actually said. Okay, now I know I'm going to finish off 5 more minutes. We could go on all night, but that would be horrible for everybody. So the thing I want to say about the kind of radical theology is kind of in the radical theology traditions, it's the unacceptable transgressions are brought to the surface. And religiously speaking, the role of the church then, and the role of the liturgy, is to bring doubt, ambiguity, and complexity, and all of those things right to the heart and right to the surface. Now, the thing about, say, fundamentalists, right? It's easy. People think fundamentalists believe too much. Oh, believe fundamentalists. Liberal critique of fundamentalism is you believe too much. No, I was a fundamentalist. They don't believe too much. They don't believe enough. There's an old joke from Russia. I love Russian jokes. They're not funny, but they tell you the meaning of life, right? But it's very, very quickly. It was Stalin supposedly was like really insecure because he was kind of killing a lot of people, and he didn't know whether people liked him or not. He thought, because every time he asked somebody, they were like, "Oh yeah, I totally like you. Like you're great." So he's like, "How do I find out if people really like me?" So he dresses up in like a disguise, and he goes to the pub. And he goes around, he talks to people, what do you think of the Stalin? Oh, I think Stalin's great, Stalin's great. And he's not getting anywhere, he's realising everybody's really nervous. So he sees a guy at the bar, goes up to him, buys him a vodka, drinks the vodka. He says, what do you think of Stalin? He says, oh, I think Stalin's great, I love him. And he buys him another drink, and Stalin's just drinking water. That's what he did, actually, in reality. You should do this in church meetings. You get all your eldership to drink vodka, and you just get poured water. And as you drink, about 4 or 5 drinks in, you'll find out exactly what they think, right? That's what's happening. So he's drinking water, he's getting this guy drunker and drunker, keeps on asking, what do you think of Stalin? Oh, I think Stalin's great. And he starts to get fidgety, and after he's asked about 4 times, he says, listen, I can't tell you what I really think, people are listening. It's like, okay, then come round the back of the bar, tell me what you really think. So they go round the back, Stalin says to the guy, okay, tell me what you really think, and he looks around, like nervously, and then he says, okay, I'll tell you what I really think. He says, I think he's great, right? Like, you're like, what does that mean? But you go into a fundamentalist church, and you go, everybody believes that God heals completely, right? Except if it's their kid, you call an ambulance. Nobody really believes it. Everybody says they believe it, but at a deep level, everyone knows it's all rubbish. It's like whenever someone says, I want you to leave, you know what they're really saying, I want you to stay. I want you to fight to stay. It's like the psychotic is the problem in the fundamentalist tradition. The one who really believes the belief, the one who doesn't call the ambulance because they said, oh, if you really believe, your kid will be healed, and their kid dies, that's more of a problem with the fundamentalists. It's not that the fundamentalists believe too much, they've got disavowed unbelief. I was in a service where the minister said, if you pray, God will heal and all of that, and he was actually also a GP. And the person beside me got up, this is no lie, got up, tripped over, broke his wrist after the service. So I'm the faithful guy, I'm the psychotic. A psychotic is one, by the way, who believes what you say. It's that if you say, if you had a good day, they actually think you mean it. So the psychotic is, like, that whole sexist trope about, a woman comes home and says, oh, I've had a terrible day, the boss is out to get me, and my best friend hates me and all this, and the rational guy goes, oh, your boss isn't out to get you and your friend doesn't really hate you. I mean, the thing about that is actually, if you look at it in a different light, the man is acting like a psychotic, because the woman could very easily turn around and go, I already know the boss isn't out to get me, and that my best friend doesn't hate me. I just want to get this off my chest so that I can come to know what I already know. So stop being a psychotic and actually believing that what I'm saying is what I'm saying, and what I'm saying is not what I'm saying. That's ridiculous. It's like if I break up with someone, I say to someone, oh, I hate that person, they were terrible, they mistreated me, it was terrible. My friend says, don't say that, they were lovely and they treated you well. But of course I know that, but I know that it was partly my fault, I know that I was an asshole and all of that, but allow me to say the stuff so I can come to know that, so that when I see them I don't crack up, and I can shake their hand and I can say, I wish you the best, and I'm sorry it didn't work out, but I love you and I care for you. You can only say that when you get out of the service. That's why I quite kind of prayers of God, forgive me and all that, and the prayers of I hate you and all of that, the stuff that brings up, because only when you bring up the stuff that you can't say can change really happen. So the Stalinist thing. So within fundamentalism, there's a whole underlying unbelief. Oh, God will take care of everything, but there's still a lightning rod on top of the steeple, right? This is the problem with unbelief. The reason why the Bible's against unbelief, I think, is not because it's the opposite of belief, but rather because it's the very thing that allows belief to continue. You have belief, but the belief is only able to operate because you've got disavowed unbelief. As soon as you get rid of the disavowed unbelief and you just look at your beliefs and become a psychotic, then it crumbles. It doesn't work. I was the guy who was, burning my record collection and all of that. It's like in church, if you think the centre is amazing and you do everything right, you've got no excuses. Oh, if I prayed more and fasted more and got rid of my record collection, did this, that, then it would be brilliant. It would be cappuccinos with Jesus. But when you do it and you realise it isn't, when you get rid of the disavowed unbelief or you don't do it, then you kind of realise that the centre doesn't hold. It's just as rubbish as everywhere else. And actually the role of the church, I think, is to expose that the centre doesn't hold. So we become a priesthood of all believers. But anyway, that's fundamentalism, that's easy. But within liberalism, what's more interesting to me is that fundamentalism isn't inside our heads, it's in the structure itself. We all doubt everything we believe, we're all asked those questions and all that, we're too mature for that. But then we sing songs and we listen to sermons and we do prayers that affirm a type of deus ex machina God, a God who makes everything whole and complete. And so what we do is we're like a parent who doesn't believe in Santa Claus but gets the pleasure of the belief because the child believes in Santa Claus. The structure itself believes for us. We don't have to be fundamentalists. The structure is fundamentalist on our behalf. What I'm really interested in, this is the challenge that I want to bring to you and to myself, is how do we create a structure, a liturgical structure, where the minister can talk about doubt, ambiguity, and I know this happens to some extent, but I want it to happen more, where there can be music that's more like Tom Waits or Bob Dylan or something like that, that's more about music that brings up stuff that helps us face our brokenness. It's not about escaping it, but actually facing it, so that we can transform church, kind of get rid of religion. And here's where I'll finish, and we can then, if we have any time, have a bit of Q&A. But it's an old joke from Belfast, and I like it. It's a bit kind of raw, but that's, troubled areas bring up interesting stories. But the IRA used to, when they put a bomb in a building, they would then phone up and say there's a bomb in the building, so it was kind of well known, and then they'd go, you got 5 minutes to get out or whatever, right? And this was kind of a well-known thing that they do. So you plant something in a incendiary device or whatever, and then phone up the police. So anyway, one of these IRA guys dies, and he goes up to heaven, and he's waiting there at the gates, and St. Peter comes out. St. Peter's like, come on, he opens the book of life, there's nothing in here, you're a terrorist, you're not getting in. And this guy's Seamus says, you misunderstand. He says, I'm not trying to get in, you have 5 minutes to get out. That is the message of radical theology, is that we want to blow up heaven, not blow up God, but blow up heaven to get God into the world. That God is not this object that makes everything whole and complete. God is found in love, where we love each other and love the world, embrace our brokenness, embrace our lack, embrace each other, and realize, and like Freud said, I want to make misery into everyday unhappiness. That's the good news. The good news is not life is great and you can have the answers. That's terrible news, because the more we think that something will make us whole, the more unhappy we are. The more we think we can have the answers, the more insecure we are. The good news is life is shit and you don't have the answers. That is good news, because if we accept that and embrace it, we go, you know what, we've got each other, we've got this world, and we've got to try and make it a better place. We've got to try and be more gracious to one another. We've got to try and love the people to our left and to our right, and we'll have good times and bad times, and we'll never hit those heroin highs, because with the heroin highs comes hell. What we do is we burn up heaven, burn up hell, and we live on the earth. And that's where God is, in the midst. That's where Christ is. That's what Bonhoeffer called religionless Christianity. To live as though God is not given in this heavenly way is to live fully before God and with God for the rest of our lives. That's me. That's it. I just want to be quiet. Anybody who wants can just slip out. Maybe have time for a couple of questions, and then we can just mill around and just fight and talk. So, but does anybody want to ask a question or push back or get clarification of anything? It's always scary being the first one.
You didn't get back to why you have to have hell if you've got heaven, or I missed it.
Well, yeah. Well, what I'm kind of saying is, every time you try to embrace heaven, say it's through consumerism or through transhumanism or through drugs or through religion, because it feels, I would say, necessarily, hell is the failure, which is either scapegoating. So you create hell for other people, you scapegoat, you push it in there, or you create symptoms, and symptoms are the unspoken, disavowed things that we do in order to maintain the system. My friend Kester used the example of gravity, if you've seen the film Gravity, which is a beautiful metaphor, I think, for this. Is this woman is up in space, she's surrounded by life-giving technology. It's the morgue aesthetic of Apple, the Apple aesthetic. She's up there in space, it's quiet. And why is she up there? She's up there because her child died. And she wants the silence of space where she's away from the earth. But in that space of heaven, crisis always arises. the symptom always returns. The symptom can obviously be hatred of others, hatred of yourself, overeating, spouts of wine, whatever it is. So in the film, the symptom, the crisis is a meteorite. It comes into the heavenly space and it crashes it. And she's holding on to God. So God is there in the form of Clooney. Lots of people, don't like Clooney. So, and he's the guy who's got all the experience. He's calm, he's there, he's helping out every step of the way. And she's trying to get from thing to thing. And eventually, which we can't really get into, but eventually she has to let go of him. But he returns in spectral form. Think of Epoch of the Holy Spirit, spectral form at different times, but as a being, as this fatherly figure, he dies. And she has to get back to earth, charting her way back to earth, so to the point where she's coming out of this primordial goo on the earth. And that's the journey that I think we have to chart. Is the journey isn't from earth to heaven, but actually from kind of this attempt to escape our finitude, to gain heaven in the job, in the money, in the person, in whatever it is, where the symptom always arises, and then is to come back to embrace our decaying bodies and our difficult relationships and our suffering, because we are all haunted houses, we're all full of ghosts, we are all haunted by the people we've loved and lost, the people we've hurt and the people who have hurt us. And it's like, a thing that I got from Kierkegaard, which I love, is I often talk about this and people say, this is really depressing, you're trying to make me depressed, you're just trying to make me unhappy, look at this, I come to this for entertainment and you're making me really depressed. And I have to go, I'm not making you depressed, I promise there's nothing in me that wants to make you depressed. I'm telling you, you already are depressed. You just don't know it. Kierkegaard called it the despair of not knowing you're in despair. And it's like, I'm not in despair, I'm out all the time partying and having a laugh. Well, of course, that's what you would do if you were in despair, because you can't sit alone and just be, because it's like, so you keep busy. It's like, I was at a nightclub and I was looking around one time, so 3 in the morning, going, imagine everyone's having such fun, everyone's having a great time, but then you kind of look and you see that something under the surface is different, is amiss, and you imagine, I wonder if you just turned on the lights and turned off the music and got everybody to look at each other just for like 5 seconds. I think half the room would be crying. So that's the heaven of the nightclub, which is boom, boom, everyone's having a great time, everything's fantastic. It's just there's a subterranean hell going on. And that's kind of what I meant. Sorry, go ahead.
I'd be interested to hear how you frame that desire for transcendence in a helpful way. You use the analogy of, heaven and hell, but of transformation or scapegoating. Obviously, there is this human urge or desire for more, for transcendence. I think you're right. If you fundamentalize it onto a particular thing, it becomes immensely complex and problematic. Just how do we honour that urge as a gift and frame that well?
Well, I would love to talk about this in depth, but I won't. I'll try and be quick. But you're absolutely right. So there is this desire for transcendence. This is exactly the reason why I think we need the church, the subversive church, right? Because it's so natural for us. We all want it. Now, I use a kind of psychoanalytic frame to basically understand this, which is kind of, in a nutshell, whenever a child is born, before there is a sense of self, there is this kind of experience of oneness with the world or whatever. The first experience of self is there's an I and then there's a you. There's an inside and outside, there's a me and then there's a not me. And the first experience of that is generally the mother. So in psychoanalysis, often you'll see it written as small n, capital O, T-H-E-R, which kind of means the other is the word for the thing we've lost. And you put an M in front of it because usually it's the mother who's the first experience of the loss, and the mother stands in for the thing that you really want. And 2 things happen in psychoanalysis, in brief, is the first thing is you have to have separation from the mother. If that doesn't happen, something terrible takes place and you become Irish, right? That's true. It's really true. It's the Irish disease. That's why Jesus was Irish, He lived with his mum till he was 30 and she thought he was God. So the first thing that has to happen is this separation from the mother. Now, interestingly, kind of very basically, if that doesn't happen, generally psychosis results in a form of psychosis, which is where you don't experience a full separation, and so you kind of voices, and you can feel like you're an instrument of the other's desire and all that. You see this, by the way, in Darren Aronofsky, who's a brilliant director who did Noah, if you've seen Noah. His first film was Pi. And both of the films, I think the only way you can actually appreciate Noah is if you watch Pi, because I think Noah seems rubbish unless you watch Pi. Both of them are about getting too close to God, about the psychosis that happens. So in Pi, there's a guy looking for a number that turns out to be the name of God, and he gets too close to God, and he has to give himself a lobotomy. And then in Noah, Noah is so close to the divine desire, he's going crazy, and can only kind of maintain sanity by kind of, in a sense, creating a break. Anyway, so psychosis results from not having that break. If you break from that, it's called alienation. The thing then you get is a child who wants to be the instrument of the mother or the father's desire. So they want to kind of they want to close the gap. They want to go back, right? They want to and they want that, right? So the second step is separation. The second step is where you realize you can't go back. You have to go forward. And interestingly, what happens then is you take elements from your past and you find them all in the world. So you start being attracted to people who are maybe like your mother, not so like your mother, because then it's kind of incestuous, but not like completely not like your mother, because then you're not attracted to them. So there's a weird kind of thing. And if that doesn't happen, the second stage is perversion. Usually perversion is this problem of the alienation has happened, but not the separation. And the third is neurosis, which is kind of the best, just depressing. But that's where you kind of and you're kind of a bit sad about the loss, but you're able to move on. What I would argue is then, the desire for transcendence is a desire to return to some primordial thing, which is closed off and impossible. And I understand Judeo-Christianity, the Jewish and Christian tradition, as breaking us apart. So, please, I'm sorry, you'll never see me again, so I'm sorry for boring you. I promise I will leave and never come back. So stick with me. People think that the covenants in the Hebrew scriptures, you think that's there to bring us close to God. The covenants are there to bring us close to God. Okay, no, it's the absolute opposite. If you have a divorce, for example, what is a contract for? Like if you go to court because you got a divorce, a contract is there to protect you from the desire of the other. So for example, if the other person suddenly doesn't want you to see the kids, well, you've gone to court, so you've got a piece of paper that says, I don't care what you desire, you have to do this. Or two people in a business transaction. The contract is not designed to bring you closer, because there already is a connection. The contract is designed to protect you from the desire of the other person. So there's a certain sense of separation from the desire. That actually maps very well onto the first step of the child, which is separation from the mother's desire. And then the second thing that has to happen is separation. And the way I read the crucifixion, where the temple curtain rips, and we see into the Holy of Holies and it's empty. And we have this idea of God experiencing the lack of God. That for me is a separation. Where then God becomes not this object that we try to return to, but God becomes that which we discover in love, which is dispersed in the world. And we find God in fragments in our interactions with everybody else, the epoch of the Holy Ghost. And so for me, the whole charting of Christianity is actually the death of God. So I'm a death of God theologian. It's the death of God as being, as object, like that, so as we find God in the midst of the world. From God as a being that we love to God as love. Now, I don't think that negates the belief in God as a being. What I'm saying is this existentially is how we encounter God, how we understand that terminology is in the midst. So I am against C.S. Lewis, who's a Belfast man like me, who I grew up 5 minutes from. But anyone who says, and I could be wrong in this, of course, I'm not, but I could be. Anybody who says that that transcendent thing is good or whatever, I'm going for me, I want to say it's natural, but I want to say it's a lure. And actually, the role of the radical community is to help us live in immanence. Finding a transcendence in immanence in God and the world. Sorry for such a long answer, but it would take longer to be brief. Maybe one more question or thought. Oh yes, thank you.
I'm wondering whether you talk about engaging God or finding God in fragments of interaction, and that God is dispersed in the world, and that we can find God in the midst of love. And I'm just wondering if you've got an experience from the last 2 or 3 weeks where you connected with God in that way that you can also share?
Wow, okay, that's very good. That's great. That's kind of like, I like the abstract stuff when it comes to that. that's a lot more difficult. This is probably a sidestepping of your question. I'm like a politician, whatever question you ask, I'll answer it the way I want. It's about Australia, and it's about being here last year and doing an event actually in a cafe, Marsville Cafe, somewhere in Sydney. Parramatta, and Kev, who's here, who's helped set it up. And what was interesting to me is, so we created this cafe that had an upstairs and a downstairs, and the upstairs we created almost like a church. And someone was singing, I once was lost and now I'm found, was blind and now I can see. And one of the rituals where we were saying, where does your faith lie? And we kind of shared where our faith lay. And upstairs, and there was a sermon, it was all of that. It's kind of like relatively traditional. There were all these mirrors around it. I once was lost and now I'm found, blind and now I can see. And downstairs was a little bit different, but when you came in, there was a sign saying God is now here, God is nowhere. You read it one way or the other. And if you read it one way, we sent you upstairs. If you said God is nowhere, we sent you up to the church. And if we said God is now here, we sent you to this dungeon downstairs, right? And downstairs, this music was, I once was found and now I'm lost, could see and now I'm blind. And the mirrors were all cracked. And the question was, where does your faith lie? Where does it lie to you? Where has it lied to you? Where has it failed? And where is it broken? And people were telling stories upstairs and downstairs, and a couple of people upstairs, they told a story about maybe a marriage, a relationship that was good and was beautiful. And then downstairs, they told the same story, but when it collapsed or broke apart. And everyone did both. So you did both. And it was a way of saying both of these are realities to us. But by bringing that to the surface and saying this subterranean aspect is also a part of us, we're trying to kind of get that seen. And I mean, that's what a service kind of looks like. That's one example. There's a million ways this can look, but that's kind of one example of what it can look like. But that is my experience of how this looks. Is I am a person I'm never that religious. I had a big conversion in the charismatic thing, but my big thing was relationships, I think, could make me whole and complete. God maybe less extent, but not really. Capitalism maybe to a certain extent, but relationships. And it was only being in a community where I was kind of like, brought up my attachment issues and the broken relationships and the broken stuff, that I think I began to let go of that and be able to find genuine friendships and relationships and a better way to live. But it wasn't a happier way to live. That's the thing. People come to me, they're like, this is a better way. No, it's not. It's terrible. But it's But do I live better than I did before? I don't know, because I'm still in this process. The reason why I'm part of communities like this is because I still struggle with transcendence. I still want it. I do have attachment issues to God or to politics. But the more I step into this immanent world, the more I step into it, the more I do find it enriching. Still just as difficult. It doesn't cure any diseases, Music doesn't cure diseases, but it can help you hopefully experience the depth of life. So that's me sidestepping the question. I'm sorry. I wish the last question I'd done a better answer to. I apologise. I guess we should kind of break it off there. Hang around if you want to discuss. I'll just be in that corner there near the chess set, and we can continue to talk. But the big thing to remember is, and if we walk away from this and don't do anything about it, it's just been an interesting evening and all of that, and that's fair enough. But if you disagree with me, thank God, right? Because you don't have to do anything about it. That's great, you're completely off the hook. Or if you think, this is just interesting, I'm just here for philosophy. But if you think there's something to what I'm saying, there's probably very few of you who do. I don't even agree with me, right? But if there's anybody who thinks there's something to what I'm saying, then you need to join with some of the people here in this room who I know and start working out how we bring that into the church. If this is what the radical church looks like, if this is what a future church looks like, if this is the place where we say, you secular world, you think you're standing outside religion and ideology, you're knee deep in it. And we want to create spaces where we challenge the political unsaid, the religious unsaid, the personal unsaid, where we bring that uncomfortable stuff to the surface, where we believe that is good news, where we believe that we can learn how to live in that, in a community of grace where we don't have to change. Because of course, as you know, in a community where you don't have to change, where you just bring that stuff to the surface, In grace, that's where you can begin to change. The more I tell you to change, the less you can. The more I demand something of you. You know, like the example of the woman who was in analysis, true example, but she was kind of like sleeping around a lot. She was like, felt really guilty for what she was doing. But she felt at least she was feeling guilty. At least the guilt stopped her from doing it more, right? But through analysis, whenever she started to work through the guilt, and she started to feel less guilty about what she was doing, so did her desire to continue to engage in kind of these unhealthy activities that were for her. I mean, she was probably still doing some of that if she wanted to, but that's not the point. The point is, for her it was problematic, but the guilt was not the thing that was stopping her. The guilt was the very thing that was making her do it. Getting rid of the obstacle is actually getting rid of the thing that is the spark to the activity. In a community of grace where we face up to the brokenness, where we bring that stuff to the surface, life is good. Where we ask local musicians from coffee shops to do the worship, where we ask comedians, because comedians are brilliant at bringing that stuff up, to do the sermons, where we create communities where we do that. That is amazing, but we have to do it. It's your responsibility. If you agree with me, it's your responsibility. Yes?
Why does that have to be done through a place of worship?
Yeah,
can't they just happen in the community anyway?
It can, absolutely. Now, I think there's two places I'm particularly interested in. One is psychoanalysis. I think actually it can happen in certain for psychoanalytic therapy and in certain churches, but that's not it doesn't exclusively happen in those places. But my reading of kind of like, for example, the kind of Christianity is the radical reading, is that the liturgical act is designed to take people on a journey through the death of God. If you've seen, there's a documentary called Kamari which does this. A guy pretends to be a guru, sets up a religion in Arizona, and like 14, 15 people follow him, you know. And at first it's a comedic documentary about how gullible people are, and he's doing this to show how gurus are just ridiculous. But then you realise that these people are real people. You learn they've got real troubles and real suffering, and the guy feels really guilty for what he's done. So he is supposed to tell them all. The whole point of the documentary is that he has the great day of revealing where he tells them they're all stupid and they all fell for this. But he can't do it, he balls it. But then at the end of the documentary, he plucks up the courage, and in humility and in love he tells them, I'm not who you think I am, I'm not a guru, I'm nobody. The things you've accomplished yourselves. We're all broken people and we're in this together. And you know, he had a big beard and he had a staff and he talked like a guru, and then he shaved all that off and he did that. That for me is what the church is supposed to do. People come to it because they're broken, because they're sad, because something isn't working. Now what the church usually does at that point is it keeps them like that, and it keeps saying we have the answer. But for me, the church, what it does is it gradually helps them feel comfortable, and then eventually says, there is no answer here. We are just a community of people together, living together, a priesthood of all believers. God is not the solution, God is in the midst. But here's the issue, is the reason why I think it is because most, I would say anywhere that does that, is it?
But it's still a belief in an external thing.
No, not at all. It's not a belief at all. I would say Christianity, or this, is not about what you believe at all. It's about a mode of being. It's not about theism or atheism. It's not about, and for me, Christianity actually is not about belief at all. It's about a mode of being. It's existential.
Why do you need God?
What's that?
Why do you need God in the equation?
You don't.
Is that what you're saying?
No, like not for me, but I'm saying that you don't need to be an atheist. You can believe in God and have this experience because it's existential. So think of it like this. If you and I agree completely and you and I disagree, I'm more likely to argue with you because we disagree and, you know, we agree. But actually, we might agree for completely, you might agree with me for completely the wrong reasons. You might agree with me. So like if you have a kid who is in analysis and you say, do you love your dad? The kid goes, yeah, I love my dad. Then you ask the Teddy, does Teddy love your dad? No, Teddy hates Daddy, right? It's not the kid who needs a psychoanalysis, it's Teddy, right? The Teddy is the disavowed beliefs of the child. Someone could say believe in God or something, but they believe in God because it's like what they say about America, you've got to love them, otherwise they'll bomb you. They might believe in God because they were told when they were kids, if you don't believe in God, you know, you'll go to hell, right? So they've repressed the reason why they believe in God, but they believe in God. So I'm totally like, so even if I think belief in God is good, if you believe in God because of that, I'll want to deconstruct that belief. So it's not about what you believe; it's about how your belief functions. That's what I'm interested in. Now, today, people concentrate on what you believe as if what you believe is important. I go, that's interesting, but you could believe good things for terrible reasons or bad things for good reasons. And that's what it's about. So, but the reason why I think that you don't find it very often is because I think most places, most New Age spirituality anyway, that I see, tries to offer transcendence, and that's what I'm against. Any community that offers a way of freedom from transcendence, I'm for. But to be honest, the secular world is mostly, I think, offering transcendence.
Sounds like you're describing a Gnosticism in general, which certainly kind of infects
Yes.
Christianity and all the religions.
Yes.
But could I just ask, maybe agreeing with you 80% or 85%, just as you can't have a heaven without a hell and vice versa, can you have a subversive existential Christianity without a structure to be ironic about, without symbols to enjoy, without
Yes. You're exactly right, and this is why, that's why I like the trickster. I don't think there's any outside of a system. I think the only way is to be in the system but subvert it. So for me, as the prophet is the ultimate example, is the figure who loves the system so much that they subvert it. That for me is the...
Can't that be the priest too?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I use the trickster, the joker, because they work for my kind of metaphors.
But as well as the prophet.
Yes, priest and prophet, yeah.
And without love.
Yeah, and I hope there's a bit of that in all of us, but yeah, but that's ultimately, it's like, you see, like Abraham, you know, Abraham's famous for kind of submitting to God, but Abraham's first thing is he's arguing with God, he's fighting with God, he's getting God to change his mind, you know. Jacob wrestles and fights with
The
God.
texts are loaded with ambiguity about why they're doing stuff, why they said that, why they didn't say that.
Absolutely. So the key for me is, you know, is that there's no, and actually in mental health in the 19th century, the moron, idiot, and imbecile were like technical terms, and the idiot was the person that with IQ of 0 to 39, something like that. But an idiot was kind of defined as someone who just did everything that they were told. You know, they just kind of walked around like that. Then there was the moron, and the moron was kind of the higher end, up to 79, from 59 to 79. The moron, the idiot was the one who's completely outside. That's right, the idiot was the one who was just like completely outside the system. The moron was the one who did everything that they were told. And then the imbecile was the one in the middle. The imbecile was the one who was kind of worked within the system, but always kind of messed it up. We all know people, like we're all of those things. We're idiots when we go to a different culture, because we're always doing the wrong thing, you know, using the wrong hand or using all of that. We're morons often in our own culture, where we just go along with things. If you're at a party and you'll see an idiot, the idiot is the person who kind of picks up the wrong, you know, wine glass, or like puts their shoes on when everyone's got their shoes off. And the imbecile is this really interesting in between. And I think we're called to be imbeciles. That the conversion is taking morons, where we just we just agree with the politics and the culture that we're in, and we briefly become idiots. Idiots is the conversion where we're sucked out of the whole political, religious and economic moment. It's the crucifixion, where whenever you're crucified, you've got no identity, you're out of the political, cultural and moral system, you're cursed of God, you're not a citizen, all of that. And then you become an imbecile, which is you enter into this tradition as a critic of it. You're in it, but you're not of it. You're always wrestling and fighting with it. That for me is the maturity.